basically my demo about the Azure email module. Previously, we already have the SMTP implementation for the email module. Now we added a new implementation that uses Azure Communication Service, which has ability to send email through the Azure platform. So one of the issues here, because the default provider based on SMTP, we need to do some refactoring to allow other provider to hook into the system. So what I did basically, instead of ISMTP service interface, we built a new interface like an iEmail service. So the SMTP implementation built on top of that interface. For that, if we enable the Azure email communication service, there will be a new menu like the other one. We previously have as MTP settings. Now we have a new settings that came from the app settings for security purpose that contain two things: the connection string, which basically has the endpoint and the access key from the Azure, and also we need the default sender. Another thing I did here, because there are common things between the two provider or all other provider, email provider, like a default sender for now. So if we go to the email, we will find three menus: Azure email settings, which is the settings for the Azure and SMTP, and there is an email settings, which is the common one. For now, I think it is simple, just has a sender, but we could add in the future like a display name. And these settings will be common for all email providers. One of the issues I faced here when I go to the settings, email, SMTP. When we are trying to test an SMTP implementation and both the modules are or the features are active, and the Azure is the latest one that I active. In the DI, the Azure implementation should win. So luckily, here, if we go to the where the email controller, admin controller. Previously, we have something like this SMTP, I think, SMTP service, because we have single implementation. But now, if we have more than one implementation active, the last one will win. So for that, there's a new APIs in the .NET 8 that we can get the service by the keys, which is, I think, suited in this case. So if I go to the SMTP implementation here, instead of added as a scoped service, I register the service add keyed scoped service with the key, which is the name of the service. Same thing in the email.azure module. If we go to the registration, we register it as a key scoped service with the Azure email service. Now, whenever we ask the DI, just we need to pass the key, and the DI will recognize we are asking for a certain implementation. And this is useful if both features are enabled. But in most cases, for example, if I have any other view, the DI will take the latest implementation. And now if I need to test this, this is email. This is a test email. If we register it in the previous way, the DI will take the Azure implementation, which will broke this UI, but using the key service, both should work fine. Now, if I send an email, it worked fine because in the controller here, I tell the DI, please give me the SMTP implementation, even though the Azure is the latest service which is registered as an iEmail service implementation. And for the Azure implementation, I don't have any UI to test it, just I have a simple unit test. You can simply add an Azure email settings, which you specify the default sender and the connection string, which have the endpoint and the access key. And normally, like the SMTP, you can pass the mail message. And whenever you send, it should kick your email. The message should kick your email. So that's it from my side. Maybe Mike will have some input about the key service because I think he is also facing some scenario in the SMS provider because we have a different implementation for his case.
Thank you. I have comments. I have all the comments to make. So first, that's a good idea to implement Azure one. It's an issue for that. Then I think it's good to introduce this new interface, iEmail service, because SMTP is effectively to implementation detail or not agnostic.
Yep.
That's good. However, so it's funny because as soon as you showed that, I was like, oh, we need to use key services. And the second after you showed the key services, so that's great. And that's something I didn't mention with Net 8. Yeah, there is key services, so it's typically something we will use in Orchard every year because we have so many implementations that we want to be specific to some components or to be able to pick one implementation over the other for some components that it would be super useful. However, I think she missed the point here because it works, that's fine. But what I would have used instead of a key service to resolve Azure service or SMTP service is just inject Azure service or inject SMTP service. Oh, sorry, resolve and inject SMTP service or Azure service because you know what implementation you want. And I think that's why you missed the point of the key service because you keyed the service by the type. It's exactly the same as registering the type itself. So I don't see why you use a key service.
I got just one thing to add on this, which is exactly what I was going to say. But then one more thing, if you do need to resolve it from the controller like you have, you could just use that new attribute. There's an attribute on the service that you can put, and it will return the same thing as well. Yep. So you don't need to inject the service provider and just.
Yeah, I don't like it. No, we know it's been there since .NET 1, but I don't like it. I prefer to be explicit on the constructor instead of having an attribute on the.
No, I agree with you 100%. But I'm saying if you need to do that, you don't need to inject the iService provider like that. You can easily simplify.
I see what you mean. I didn't see that. Yes, you're right. That's new. So with a key service, you can. There is an attribute for the key of the service. Yeah, true.
Yes, from key service. I tried, but I got an exception for unknown reason.
Oh, interesting. Maybe a bug. And maybe because nobody thought about doing what you did, which shows that it's wrong, that using the service itself as the key, which is weird. So yeah, here you should just have resolved SMTP service, SMTP email service. There is no reason to use a key service here. However, you can still use a key service here because, well, let me think. You can still register the thing as should you maybe not here. Maybe there is no reason to use key service. Yeah, so this UI should just resolve SMTP service, and that's it. That can be complete.
Yep.
So I don't think you need key service here actually, but key service would be useful. So an example for kid service that will be useful. Imagine we want to cache stuff, and we have an high distributed cache. Okay.
Yep.
And we might want to use different implementations of the distributed cache based on the service that we want to cache. For instance, the output caching, we might want to use, well, it's not a good example, but because it doesn't implement this interface, but let's say we want to use an implementation for high distributed cache that goes into Redis, another one that goes into memory, another one that goes on the file system. And we want, I don't know, Lucene to use Redis, but we want the output cache to use the file system, and we want, I don't know, the content manager to use memory. But they all need to resolve an high distributed cache implementation. Now you can say, I want high distributed cache. I want to register this high distributed cache implementation for the Lucene context. And then Lucene will say, give me the high distributed cache for Lucene. So that's things that we will be able to do now. But here, I don't think you need kid services.
The problem here, just I think, because previously we have just a single implementation, and for testing, we need to make sure that we have an SMTP implementation only. So when I tested before I enable the Azure, everything is work fine. Or if you enable the SMTP after the Azure, everything should work fine, because the DI, when you get the iEmail service, it will give you the SMTP implementation. But the problem raised when the Azure register after SMTP.
So you don't understand.
And because of this,
I will re-explain.
Okay.
Show me your .add singleton or add whatever.
Okay, here.
Add kid service. Show me the add kid service here. Okay. Instead of saying add kid scoped, you say add scoped SMTP email service. Add scoped. And in between lesser than, greater than, the angle brackets, just SMTP email service.
I see.
You registered this service. So your controller resolves SMTP service. Then the line after, you do services.addScoped email service. So the line after. So perfect. Now line after. Services.addScoped email service. Comma. Sorry, email service. And in the parentheses, you say SP in a lambda. So that's okay. In the lambda SP a row. And then you say sp.resolve SMTP email service.
Okay.
Okay. This way you have a single instance, which is SMTP email service that will be returned when you ask for an email service. But if you ask for SMTP email service, you will get the same thing explicitly. Okay.
Got it.
That's why I think you didn't need iKit service.
Yep. Okay.
Are you done with your comments, Sebastian?
Yeah.
Okay, I have one thing. I actually think you should use keyed services, and here's why. What you did here, I agree with Sebastian 100%. In this injection that you're showing right now, you just need to inject the SMTP email service, and that's it. Okay. I would still register in keyed services so we can distinguish between the different implementation.
Cool.
The reason why I suggest that, because I think you can improve the UI a lot. Currently, your UI, you have a lot of settings on the side. You have SMTP settings, you have email settings, and then you have, I think, Azure something settings, right?
Yep.
So I think that's not a good UI, at least from my perspective, because it's very confusing. However, I think what you should do here is follow the SMS implementation. If you want to show the SMS implementation, the UI, I can explain it better. But basically, the UI, what you can do is just have one UI called email settings, right? I don't care about the implementation details at this point. Just one menu item, email settings. You click that menu item, you'll be able to see like a radio buttons with all the implementation that are available. So in this case, you'll have SMTP service, or you'll see the Azure service, or if someone else wants to add some new service, they're able to very easily because they can just inject a keyed service. Now the UI, you'll have a radio buttons, right? So if you say I want SMTP service, then you click SMTP service, you'll see on the same screen the SMTP configuration. If you change that to Azure, then you'll be able to see the Azure implementation. And then you're also building the UI for anyone else that wants to provide a service. For example, I like to do in my project, I have a service as a pre-configured SMTP service, meaning like if I add a new tenant, by default, I gave them what's called system settings. So system settings provide out of the box for the tenants an email, pre-configured email that they can just use to send things like email notification, things like that. However, if they want to change it, they can select SMTP settings and they can override it by their own custom settings. So if I want to do something like that with this UI that you'll have, I can easily register my keyed service, and then your UI will allow me to do exactly what I want by extending it. So you're making your UI extensible, and at the same time, you're making it much simpler because you have one menu item that you can click on it and you can go and change anything email related from one single place. That's the only thing that I think.
I have a counter argument to that. And this is also related to the keyed service. I like the fact that we can see SMTP settings and Azure settings in the settings menu and not in the dynamic UI, because that's changing the portrait paradigm for configuration. You may have different requirements for dynamically changing the UI that is unnecessary here. And the argument related to keyed service, based on what Hisham has done in the UI, is that I think it's fine to have SMTPs, to not have a radio, but to be able to configure SMTP service independently from Azure service email, because you might want to have the two providers at the same time, because now we have keyed services. So we might want a workflow task to, and not hard-coded, we might want to be able to configure which one to use in which context. And then the context will say, I don't want the email service. I want the email service keyed with workflow, because I want to be able to select what implementation of the email service from all the available ones will be used for the workflow or the workflow activity. So that's the idea. This way you could register, like I showed you, register SMTP service and then register iEmail service keyed out of workflow, workflow type, and then the workflow will resolve this one. So yeah, this way you can reconfigure independently which one you want.
Yep, what Mike did is great, but there's one limitation, as Sebastian said. If I need kind of fallback, or I will create a workflow that use certain implementation, if we go and select a certain provider, I'm not sure how we can make multiple provider work at the same time.
Well, I mean, if you have if your workflow depends on the implementation, like this, like this controller, you don't.
No, you're wrong. What you're saying is wrong. I'm not saying they depend on a specific implementation, because what I showed here in this screen is when you depend on a specific implementation, you resolve the implementation. Right. What I'm saying is when you want to be able to switch among different implementations provided by different modules, you don't know them. But in the end, you might want a different one from workflows than a different one from content management. I don't know. You don't know which ones yet, but you know you might want to be able to have different one. And that's why the keyed services are there.
So you're saying you might want to have to configure multiple services at the same time, and then
Yes.
based on your need, you can pick and choose which one you want.
Yes, and I don't know yet what will be the story for that, but key services are what, and that's the example also I gave with cache. We might not just have one cache, like Redis, everything in Redis. No, we might have 3 different distributed caches now. And in the end, they might all be the same in Redis, but now we have a way for each component to say what kind of distributed cache they want. They could have a different one now. So that is opening some things. We need to think about it for .NET 8 now because we have that.
True.
Maybe we can have some magic where in the settings we can provide the key as the name of the type that is the key. And
Yep.
these types, they might not be, the idea is that they are just tagging types. So I could create a new type that is completely empty, just so we can reference it as a key, right? And we could have a setting in the settings that is the name of the thing. And then we see, okay, give me the type that is the name in the settings, resolve the thing that is for this type, done. And
Yep.
this way we won't get the default email service. We will get,
Yep.
we can say in configuration, give me the email service that is configured for workflows. And somewhere else we can say for workflows, we can use Azure service. And for the other ones, we'll use SMTP service.
Then maybe instead of having the radio button, we can have a drop-down menu that tells us, hey, which is the default service
So
to use?
That's
then,
the next step.
Yes.
Yeah. How do we configure that in the UI, or how do we expose that?
Yeah, and then maybe tabs, each service in a separate tab. But I think you should only need one page. You shouldn't really need multiple menu items.
I think we talked about it when you showed your feature, that instead of having the drop down, I said, why don't you use tabs or yeah, we talked about it. I think we should watch this video. But you had an argument about your dynamicity, which was different. Because we have this kind of UI, right, with tabs and
Yes.
And so
yeah, we already support that.
Yeah. Okay, I have to go. It's late. I just have a few minutes to have lunch. Thank you, Hisham. Very good idea, and for driving the discussion and introducing the kid services. So please, for whoever watches the meeting now or didn't know about the kid services, then look at the settings. It's opening lots of possibilities, and lots of libraries now are integrating that as their support. Yep. Awesome, great job. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, man.